Before we begin, I'd just like to thank a certain someone, that someone being a ghostly French toast. He helped me write the script for this episode. Without him, this video wouldn't be possible, so again, thank you mate for helping me write the script. If you would all please go check his channel out. He's a fellow scholar of the lore for souls and he's very passionate about souls, so please give him a subscribe and check out his content. It is very, very good. So with that all said and done, thank you, and I shall see you in the next one. Those banished from the undead berg eke out their existence in the depths, a damp lair with no trace of sunlight. Nearly half of the depths form a perilous flooded labyrinth. The door to the depths is very unique and not one typically seen throughout the berg. Thick reinforced wood with a small barred window allowed for communication between the inhabitants and the soldiers. This communication was vital in relation to the events that had occurred down in this damp dungeon. The depths and the region above were built within the last 300 years. When standing in the Royal Garden of Ullasil, the undead Bergen parish cannot be seen. It has yet to be built. It seems then that the depths did not function as just your ordinary sewer for long. As the newly built society flourished, the bad apples needed to be discarded, so the depths were chosen. This flourishing society, however, not only produced the unwanted, but attracted the uninvited. This bustling society had led a creature from the very beginnings of the world up into the modern age. Its hunger drove it mad. Never being able to satiate this craving, it crawled its way up through the valley, later known as Blighttown. The network of chambers had become its hunting grounds. It stalked the area, feasting on whatever could be found or captured. People, corpses, rats, all aided in the growth of this creature. The never-ending hunger caused this monster to push further into the depths, bending back the iron bars until it found its lair. The people of the depths knew of this apex predator, but kept well away from the sounds that came from the dark. However, at some point in time, new guests arrived. These guests were many, crazed by the thirst for a clean life. Breaking through one of the large sewer tunnels, they clung to the walls with their wooden walkways. Wood, questionable mortar, cord, and what seemed to be spider silk had enabled them to reach the tunnel at the far end of the chamber. Chaos quickly erupted. These desperate people fought with such ferocity it became too much to handle. The people of the depths called for the soldiers' aid. A unit of soldiers were quickly dispatched to fight off these polluted invaders. Soldiers entered the depths. They had to be cautious. The people banished here were not to be trusted. They were murderers, man-eaters, and madmen. The thick heavy air was pungent with the smell of something awful. It seems the banished had decided on a location for human waste, right beneath the living quarters. Reaching the chamber, the soldiers fought the desperate invaders. The battle was quickly over as the weaponry of the polluted people were extremely primitive and in terrible condition. With the new arrivals pushed back, measures to ensure this did not happen again had to be implemented. Supplies were given to the banished. Wooden crates containing large sheets of iron, nails and hammers were all transported by makeshift carts. A great iron door was constructed, where it then remained closed, sealing the desperate people in the valley below. Life in the depths continued. Every so often a new resident would be added. It seems there were no shortages of madmen in Lordran. The banished shared no belongings. There was little between the men and women. The only thing of value was the gigantic knives. These knives belonged to the cooks of the depths. Nicknamed the butchers, they carved away at any meat they could find. There was little in the way of food. The strongest preyed on the weak. When an individual was sick or close to death, they would become the next supper. This diet of human meat had gone on since the depths first became a prison. The long exposure to the rotting meats and grimy conditions had taken its toll. The cooks were the first to change. Their skin began to blacken, they increased in size, and their features were forever warped into something hideous. Unable to accept their transformation, they placed sacks upon their heads. Their identity and indeed sex then became a mystery to all. The food was handed out on plates and bowls. Any waste from the butcher's preparation was thrown into a hole. This hole led down below into the upper section of a sewer chamber. Over the many years this formed a huge pile of rotting human remains. A rat had discovered this source. When feasting on the remains, it had also eaten the small sprites of humanity that all humans carry within them. This exposure to a never-ending supply of the dark soul had caused this rat to increase in size. It had become so large it could no longer leave the chamber. Now trapped, it became an obstacle for any unfortunate soul that may have disturbed its feast. The rat, however, is not the only thing to be affected by the dark soul. The many disposed bodies that had been left to rot had been turned into something horrific. Rotting body tissue with fading souls crawled the walls in search for life. It formed bloody clumps that would eventually become a hostile entity. If these rotting cocoons were left untouched, a thick, translucent slime would form. This horror, driven by the souls of the dead and the dark souls that they carried, hung from the ceilings, ready to ambush its prey. Many things had become a quick meal for the monster that crawled from the bowels of the earth. It was left undisturbed for many years. The banished, being too afraid to venture deep within the sewers, called again for the soldiers' aid. However, their cries for help fell on deaf ears. The soldiers believed this to be a trick, so would ignore any who would come to the barred door. However, this monster had grown so large, the very walls of the depths could no longer contain it. Huge holes could be seen from the exterior of the overflow chamber. Eventually, the soldiers were ordered to investigate and repair these damages. A large unit was dispatched and they slowly descended into the rotting hell. Unfortunately, the hatred of these soldiers had reached its limit. No aid was ever given to improve these banished and their lives. Their calls for help were constantly ignored. Revenge was in the air, thick and heavy like the stench that riddled this place. The banished attacked. The soldiers, although well armed, were overrun. Frenzied with revenge and hunger, the banished managed to kill one soldier, later hiding his corpse behind boxes, in case any more soldiers came to investigate the missing unit. The unit was pushed further into the depths. Their panic grew, resulting in some fleeing. These would later be caught by the monstrosities that called this damp place their home. The remaining soldiers had only one option: keep moving until they reached their objective. They slowly turned the corner and the huge chamber revealed itself. Golden traces of light trickled down the mossy bricks, hitting the floor. As they got closer, they realised that all was not as it seemed. The supporting pillars had been reduced to rubble. Atop the floor sat this thick, pungent substance. Its stench was like no other. Their eyes began to dart around the room. They quickly realised that they had walked right into the home of some humongous being. Soldiers were desperately ordered to take positions. Some had come equipped with heavy crossbows. It seemed then that the horrific stories from the banished had not been entirely ignored. Preparations had been taken, but it wasn't enough. It was a slaughter. The fight finished before it had truly begun. The screams of the dying soldiers echoed through the many tunnels. The key to Blighttown was forever lost, swallowed whole like the unfortunate soul that carried it. Countless years passed. The undead curse caused many kingdoms to fall and the events of the depths to be forgotten. The depths remained closed. The world above slowly began to match its insanity.